Hey everybody, welcome. Talking today about how to manage anger so that it doesn't control you. You know those moments when something triggers you and your temper just flares up, right? Before you know it, you've gone from 0 to 100 and you are losing your temper and shouting at somebody. And that is not the sort of person that you want to be. I know that is not your integrity. That's not how you want to show up. And I used to be the same. I used to lose my temper very easily. I've shouted so many times at people that I dearly loved and cared about and did not want to um, did not want to hurt, and inevitably did hurt through the way that my anger came out unfiltered, unprocessed, unaware, unfortunately. So I'm just in the process of adding Michelle Holmes to this live stream. Hi, Michelle, welcome. It says you're being added. Let's hope that that's happening. Let me just see if I try one more time. We'll have to see. Michelle, if you can see me or hear me, drop me a message. It looks like you're being added, but I don't know if that's actually happening. We can always try again if it's not working well. So yeah, this is for everybody who's watching, who has had or is still having a difficult relationship with anger. Let me just try and find out what's happening with Michelle here. Forgive the technical glitch as we are just working through that piece.
Hello there.
Oh, here she is. Wonderful.
Thanks.
Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you. It's an important topic.
Yeah, beautiful. I'm so glad to have you here. Thank you so much for being willing to chat with us and share your journey, because I know that, you know, I've also journeyed with this, and you've journeyed with overcoming the way that anger can really derail us and really sabotage us and getting to a different place. So that's the conversation we're having today. Right. Welcome. Would you like to say a little bit about, well, who you are and what you do, and yeah, share with us the challenges that you used to face with anger?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Natalie. So right now I'm showing up in the world supporting people who are moving through a lot of fear into self-love. And I'm a breath worker, hypnotherapist, and coach. And I really attract people who are working with big emotions. And for me, the biggest emotion that I carried for much of my life was anger. In fact, as long as I could go back in my childhood, it's sort of the core of my self-expression was anger. And it really came from a place of injustice. You know, like I somehow was born a child who was an adult in here. There was only this tall. And so nobody really treated me, unfortunately, like an adult. But in my little sense of being, it was kind of carrying this outrage that, you know, what I felt was a real sense of being controlled. And, you know, I'll say it took me 40 years really to even realize there was a different way, that this wasn't just that this wasn't just who I was. So I'd love to hear kind of about understanding where this starts for you, or, you know, asking me any questions.
Yeah, beautiful.
I'd love to share this in a way that's helpful for you and the people tuning in your community.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much for your honesty and vulnerability with sharing where you've started from. And I really get that. I also had a very strong sense of feeling controlled as a child, and I was also very strongly bullied in my early teens for about 2 years, to the point where I was actually suicidal. I was actually like, this is so hard. I can't figure out how to do life. And it feels so unfair, so deeply unfair,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
that I was, yeah, really considering some exit options. Thankfully, never took
mm-hmm,
those. But anger became my defense, my way of surviving the bullying, and my way of making sure that nobody ever hurt me again, because they hurt me a lot, and making sure that I could defend myself was just using anger as a defense over and over. But like you, it took me until, yeah, well into my 30s to realize that not everybody works this way. Like for me, I was like, this is just how life is, right? You know, people piss you off and
mm-hmm,
you shout at them and then they go away. What I discovered through relationships was that actually I was getting into relationship with men who didn't shout, who were actually beautiful, loving, kind beings. And when I lost my temper and I shouted at them, they really didn't like it. And
mm-hmm.
it took that reflection for me to realize, like, oh, maybe there is another way. Maybe not everybody does this whole shouting and yelling at each other thing. So that's where I've started. But I'm super curious to hear, like, from you, and I'll share my journey as and when, you know, as well. How did showing up in life with a lot of anger negatively impact you in the beginning?
Well, I, I mean, it kept me in a kind of a constant state of opposition and battle, because it was not only my family of origin where there was just lots of anger, lots of love, but also just anger as the way one expressed, you know, just um, and so I think really not developing uh, tools of presence, because I use the tool of reaction.
Mm.
And, you know, I married very early, and unfortunately took a lot of my old yelling behavior in, even as I raised my young children, you know, and I felt it again. I don't even believe that I questioned whether anger, I can remember people occasionally saying their parents never fought or their children never fought like explosively. And I thought, they're lying.
Yeah, me too.
They're lying. It's like I didn't even really understand that there could be such an expression. I really didn't. I thought it was just hidden. And, you know, in some people, some relationships, it is just hidden. But in others, I've come to understand, certainly in the marriage that I'm in now, that it's possible to come into, you know, varying points of view without ever moving into an angry place. But I want to go back for a moment into sort of this expression for me in the workplace. When I was in my early 20s, again, that sort of powerlessness, which is always what brought on this anger. And in times when it wasn't possible to explosively scream, I did actually go in at the time I was in the newspaper industry, in which actually sort of the model was that the person who had the job I had, called the city editor, would shout and scream at people. So I
Oh,
actually manifested a profession in which you actually screamed and called people names. I think that's mostly out of that profession, as well as many others. But this was 25 years ago, and the vestiges of it were still there.
yeah.
For me as a woman in this role, I didn't generally take that approach. But what happened was it became that sort of pettiness and backbiting. Can you believe what Natalie did? Oh, I can't believe it. It's
Oh,
horrible. You know, wow.
yeah.
And so that then became the thing that seemed that everybody did, because around me in the workplace, everybody was there. Nobody was ever, and I say everybody and nobody. I'm aware of that. But sort of my perception at the time was that's what one did. If you couldn't scream and call someone a total idiot, you would turn to the person next to you and express that anger in what may be a more destructive way. I don't know which is more destructive, really both equally destructive. But those were the patterns that arose from me. And, look, I'm going to be honest, Natalie, there were times that my explosive anger helped me in my career, especially dealing with men who were actively subverting my authority,
Right.
because I could channel that anger into a very quiet rage
Yeah.
in which they knew that I was in
Yeah.
charge. Now, all of that really took a huge toll on me, which is probably how I got to be where I am now, in a different career, in a different
Yeah.
world. But that's sort of the big picture of how anger and rage, born of the inability to feel in control,
Mm.
uh, kind of played out for me, and certainly in the first few decades of my life.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing and for your honesty and vulnerability with that too. And I get really curious of those who are watching, like, how does anger show up for you in your life? Are you finding yourself caught in the circles, or have you been in the past caught in these circles that Michelle speaks of, where like this passive aggressive anger, the bitchiness, the gossiping, those places? I know certainly I had that in my workplace too when I was in my 20s. And for me, the way that I really learned that I had to change my behavior with anger was when I started losing friendships. I actually had some beautiful, dear friends who had been there for me through difficult times and who had, really shown up for me in the friendship. And because we were so close, because I found that my anger really came out with those that I was close to in moments when I didn't feel supported by that person, or I felt like I really needed that person and they couldn't be there for me. That's when my anger would come out at the people that I loved and cared about. And understandably, those people didn't want to stick around. Once they'd had a taste of quite a strong blast of anger, they were like, actually, maybe Natalie's not the safe space that I thought she was. And maybe, I actually want to take a bit more distance from Natalie. And it took me losing a good couple of really beautiful friends for me to be like,
Mm.
wow, like I did that. I know I created that. Of course, the circumstances and my lack of awareness, and you can justify it to the hills and back. But ultimately, I knew that I had played a huge part in that. And I was hurting myself from my own behavior. So for me, I had to change
Mhm.
because I didn't want to keep losing people that I loved and cared about and hurting myself in that
Mhm.
way. So for those who are watching, like, have you had an experience like that, either where you've been in my position where you lose your temper, you shout at people you love and care about, and then you feel dreadful afterwards, like so much regret and
Mhm.
so much
Mhm.
self-hatred?
Mhm.
Or have you been on the other side? Have you been someone who has been shouted at and really, like, it took away like your breath in the moment, and you were like just so floored that anybody that you cared about could actually speak to you in that way? So
Mhm.
yeah, we'd love to hear from you. Just message in the comments and let's
Mhm.
let's make that interactive. We want to hear from you.
Mhm.
So yeah, Michelle, do you remember, like, was there a pinnacle moment where you thought, actually, this needs to change? And what were your first
Mhm.
steps towards changing this, if you remember them?
Yeah, so I'm embarrassed to say I don't really think there was that point. I think change happened, and then I began to understand in a different way. So I wish I could say, as you did, and I appreciate, your self-awareness and being able to see, like, when I look back, oh, lots of suffering about those, especially my children, where I
Mm,
allowed my anger to express. For me, the shift didn't happen with a conscious choice, because again, I really, to I did know that I could control my anger, but what would happen is it was a control, rage, control, rage, shame, that
Yeah.
cycle, which you already
Yeah.
expressed. So for me, it was really doing other work, kind of coming into conscious community, falling into conscious community, and really starting to use tools that I didn't really know what they were for. I was just sort of invited in to use these tools, and I realized, wow, wow. So I have it's okay to express this
Mm.
rage, and in expressing that rage, I began to feel my sort of rage reaction draining. One of the things that I work with in clients, and the metaphor I can use is like a bathtub drain that is getting clogged and clogged with unexpressed emotion,
Yeah.
until when a small just bit of emotion tries to go in, it can't go through. So for me, it was this practices of emotional release, of releasing rage, as well as doing the self-love work of creating this safe, compassionate place for me that I could sit with those feelings.
Amazing. And I just, for those that are watching, how many are parents that have lost their temper with their children? Because this is such a common thing. You see it every day in the street. And I know friends of mine who are parents who feel dreadful, just so much shame and guilt, like wanting to be a better parent in that way, but just not knowing how to manage those really difficult moments, um, and feeling so overwhelmed and out of control in those moments that the explosion just happens before the awareness can kick in. So if that's
Mm-hmm.
you, put a yes in the chat. I'd love
Mm-hmm.
to just see who out of our audience, just write a yes in the chat if that's you,
Mm-hmm.
because yeah, you're definitely not alone in that experience, Michelle, for sure.
You know, that when I was parenting,
Mm,
my oldest is now a mother, so I two oldest are mothers, so I'm a grandmother. The, there, the conversation around mental health was different. The conversation around parenting was different. There was no live kind of conversations happening. It was still more about controlling the behavior of one's child, which just now, as I say that, you know, it blows my mind. And the resources now for parents, and the understanding of emotional tools, um, and emotional conversations of parents and children is a remarkable, I think, progress.
yeah. Yeah, I love what's been coming out the last sort of 10, 15
Mm-hmm.
years or so of really honoring the child's needs, their emotions, teaching the child healthy boundaries and consent from a
Mm-hmm.
young age, um, allowing the child to actually have a voice and opinion. And yeah, you're right, it used to be so much about controlling appearances, right? Because we were coming out from the Victorian era still, where it was very much this presentation above all else, and appearance and reputation above all else. And now, thank God, it has shifted to finally actually be more about the individual experience and less about what everybody else thinks, and more about, hey, actually, is this child or is the individual, because you know it's children and it's adults as well, but are our individual needs being met and honored? Are our boundaries being respected? Because it's also worth really mentioning here, as I'm sure you've learned as well, Michelle, that anger is a really useful emotion. It's actually there to
Mm-hmm.
tell us that a boundary has been crossed.
Mm-hmm.
So there can be this misperception, which is, you know, somewhat outdated, but it's still around, that anger is somehow a wrong emotion or a bad emotion or evil or some negative connotation, where actually I now love my anger. The relationship I have with my anger now is one of absolute love, because I know that if I'm feeling angry, something somewhere has happened that isn't okay for me. And
Yes.
then
Mm-hmm.
it's a backtracking
Yeah.
of working out, okay, so this is information. What do I need to reflect on that hasn't been okay for me? Does that does
Thank
that
you. Well, thank you
resonate
for
with you?
saying that, because it's easy to get far down the path of a conversation about anger without recognizing and valuing anger for exactly for exactly that reason. It is what allows us to show up uh, for ourselves, for the world. And, you know, for me now, as you, and it's so interesting to talk to you, Natalie, and hear your perspective. For me, it's like a whoosh of fire. It's like a whoosh. And I think, wow, it's like one of the most powerful forces on earth is that human anger that just tells us, you know, I think of, is it Gandalf in the Lord of the Rings, you know, thou shalt not pass. It's like, ah, it's, you know, it's the power of the human spirit to stand, you know, for something, against something, in our power.
Yeah.
And so for many women, the disconnection between anger and our power starts very early as we begin to be told, do not be angry. We are essentially feeling told, do not be powerful.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I thank you for raising that. And somehow that needs to kind of come with a subheadline on every conversation about anger. Yeah, especially where women are concerned.
And I'd love to hear from those who are watching either live or the replay. Stick a yes in the comments if this resonates for you, if you recognize this surge of power that comes with anger. And this is also why, for me, and I think you spoke to this too, Michelle, that in the beginning of your career, there were elements where actually having that anger and that power was really actually beneficial for you in your job. And I remember being somebody who was recovering from having been bullied quite severely, feeling that power in myself was it was like a correction, a massive correction of all of the times in my bullying that I had felt powerless. So for me to express my power when I was younger, it was like a reclaiming of the power that I hadn't been able to access as a child from the bullying, or from being told, you know, I'm a girl, I'm supposed to be X, Y, and Z, and you know, women or ladies aren't supposed to express anger, and all of this very old conditioning, which is, you know, you and I showing our ages here, but I'm curious, you know, anyone in the chat, does this resonate? Stick a yes in the chat if you're like, oh yeah, I feel this, I feel the same. And this power that we feel, for me, was quite addictive. Like, it was, I didn't really want to let go of the power. I wanted to stop being angry, but I didn't want to stop being powerful. And I'm curious, like, how do you work with women around that, Michelle? Because I feel like that's an edge that you have are supporting your clients to walk with as well.
Well, so a few different ways. I mean, I recognize that for me, my journey through anger was not through kind of calming, coming into peace. That's not where I release my anger. My release of my anger really had to happen through being in safe environments to fully express.
Yeah.
To fully express. And once I had that capacity, I also had the capacity then to settle and find the places of calm and quiet inside of me. So I use emotional release tools in my work, and also just allow the expression of the core of the anger, not only through emotional release, but also through owning and naming that anger in ourselves. So the idea that this is an inside job is that this anger, so often in the first part of our lives, is in the outside. It's because this person did something bad, and we look out in the landscape and there are bad things everywhere. There are harmful things everywhere. So we can allow ourselves to kind of get stuck into that, seeing reasons to be angry everywhere.
Yeah.
And so when we can come in and find where we're angry with ourselves, and make that peace accord inside, when we can come in with compassion to those places, it really it changes and shifts.
Yeah. Beautiful.
In a, in a big way.
Thank you. Yeah, I love hearing that. Yeah, it's so precious to have that safe space to be able to express our anger. And actually what I learned in my journey was once I started expressing, giving my anger actual permission, like being in a safe space to express that anger in a place where I wasn't going to hurt anyone, I wasn't going to upset anyone, this anger wasn't directed towards anybody. And actually I'm holding a workshop at the end of the month, which we'll talk about at the end of this live stream, where I'm holding that space for others to facilitate
Mm-hmm.
the safe release of not just anger, but all emotions. What I learned when I started to express my anger was actually there was so much sadness
Mm-hmm.
underneath my anger. And actually, my anger was just a protection so that I didn't have to see or feel or express my sadness. But once I removed that protection layer, the grief could come. And there was so much grief. And it was a beautiful, sacred space that was held. I did emotional release tools like you've done. I think we've both had the same training in that
Mm-hmm.
way, where this beautiful safe space was created to express all of my emotions freely. And it just relieved me of so much past. Like it was literally like taking, sandbags off my shoulders of years of emotions. And I'm curious if you had anything similar like that.
Well, I think what I had access to, and it sounds like the kind of training you're doing gives people the space, which is when that sort of the compressed, what I think of as the compressed layers of decades of anger begin to move, we find and claim a new feeling of our own power that is very still. So it's a power because it's not driving us outward, but it's driving us inward. And so that's to me is the shift. And so I'd love to hear sort of as people go through your workshop, what have you experienced as sort of that holding space at the end that that
Yeah,
that participants come into?
exactly as you speak. There's a beautiful stillness that comes at the end once the anger, the grief, the fear, the frustration, the resentment, the whatever is moving or whatever is ready to move, once that has
Mm-hmm.
been given permission to express in a space where it's safe, it's not judged, it's just held and released, the beautiful stillness that is available. And actually I get my participants to lay in shavasana position in a place of stillness at the end of our rituals that we do, where you can just feel the energetic shift within. So much in the body has moved, so much has been released, and the energy body literally does a reconfiguration. um, and this stillness is a natural thing that arises, but it's also a really vital part of the integration as well, to allow the energy body to reconfigure and to settle. Yeah, is this something that you've
Yeah,
noticed?
Natalie, and I'm picturing, and anybody who's watching this who is going to come to your event is, I hope gets to have this experience, which is as we look out on the world landscape of humans in rage, anger, fear, and then you come in consciously choosing to express with a field of other humans who are doing their inner work of expressing safely, with respect, with honor, being cared for, caring for one another. It has been when I have done that kind of work, I recognize, wow, like it's one of the things that say, wow, how have we not had spaces like this in which we get to show up, with our totality and what the value, just the felt sense of that is for me. So I'm hoping that some people watching here are going to get to have that experience. I would love to hear how that
Yeah,
is for you and your.
yeah, for sure. Maybe we can do a live stream
Yeah,
afterwards.
yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more also about the other tools you've used. You mentioned you're a breathwork facilitator and that breathwork has been part of your journey with your emotions. How has breathwork been a support for you?
So I practice and lead people through clarity breath work, which is really a very feminine form of heart-centered breath work. And as I went through my facilitator training, I found just I could best describe like just a secret vault of self-compassion that I didn't know that I had access to. And it changed my life in many, many ways. But it now having access to that, along with other work that I have done in the heart, doing lots of heart-based work, has allowed me to have a place to bring the anger. So now when I feel that whoosh of anger, instead of following it into the outside, I'm able to feel that whoosh of anger, honor it, and then bring it into a space where I can sit with that compassion. And so that breath really, for me, Natalie, it allowed me as a long time, so as a journalist, as an editor, um, as somebody who was an aggressive leader, I was really working through the mind. And so when breath work was one of the key tools helping me come in to my heart and create and establish that place. And I can actively now work with my anger by bringing it into that heart space.
That sounds so beautiful the way you describe it. It sounds like a transmutation almost
Beautiful way
of
to say it.
the,
That, yeah, isn't a word I usually use, but yeah, that's what it is.
mm,
I think at its core. And the beautiful thing about breath, that I just want to plug our breath.
please
Obviously, we all
do.
have breath,
Please do.
but we have breath with us all of the time. And the idea that we have been in many ways as a culture robbed of our capacity to use the tools we have to work with challenging emotions. The other I use, I'm a havening practitioner, which is touch, a form of very gentle touch.
Mm.
So these tools of touch and breath, it's almost like humanity has tried to go with its hands tied behind its back for centuries of just not simply having the tools that our body offers. Our body, like we are designed through millennia to have breath and
Yeah.
touch to support us with our emotional states of being. And so to me, that's why I'm dedicated to using that work.
Mm.
It's sort of the core human expression. We don't need to think our way out of anger. We can hold our anger. So that's sort of my breath journey. What about you? You've said that you've used breath as well.
Yeah. So I actually also am a shamanic, a breathwork facilitator in the shamanic breathwork
Yeah,
modality,
familiar with that too.
and yeah, from the amazing Linda
Mm-hmm.
Starwolf, who I've trained with, and yeah, beautiful, amazing lady. Um, I discovered shamanic breathwork when I was in this place of trying to learn to transform my emotions and be more connected to my body. But what I didn't know then that I know now is that I'm actually highly sensitive. I feel huge amounts, which I didn't know back then because I had conditioned myself out of it through layers and layers of protection and numbing and yeah, dissociation. So when I wanted to learn how to feel my emotions and also feel pleasure in my body, because the two are simultaneous, I couldn't hold enough space in my body for it. It was overwhelming. Like I would try, and then it would overwhelm me, which would then make me frustrated and angry. So it was a bit of a cycle that I needed to find a different path. And shamanic breathwork for me was that path,
Mm-hmm.
where using the breath to go deep into the body and to really awaken the energy body within allowed me to start feeling my own energy body and to develop the capacity to hold space for more sensation in my body, which also had the beautiful added advantage of more pleasure in my body as well. But opening up the ability to just be with my body more in sensation, pleasure, emotion, energy, all of those things. And it was through shamanic breathwork that really allowed me to do that, because even now when I use shamanic breathwork, I still get really heightened sensations in my body through using the breath. And I'm continuing to grow my capacity to experience like hold more emotion, hold more sensation, hold more pleasure in my body without flipping into overwhelm. So
Mhm.
yeah, quite a different journey to yours, but it also highlights, as you say, like breath is the natural thing that we're born with, you know. It's and how many of us hold our breath when we're stressed or scared or frightened, which is a very natural reaction, but it also, we can develop patterns around not breathing fully. And if we don't know to correct that and to come into the full breath, then we lose this beautiful gift that is there to help regulate the nervous system, as
Mhm.
you were speaking to.
Mhm. And shamanic breath work, and I've taken part in many of those, is such a sort of such a full body immersion with so much permission to be, the music, the hugeness that's kind of created. I think is a beautiful practice.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. So we've spoken about um, emotional release
Mhm.
and different types of breath work for being tools for supporting us to journey more with our anger. And I'd love to hear from you, Michelle. Like, how is it for you now? You've spoken to like this whoosh of anger and the bringing into your heart space. Like, how has being able to work better with your anger transformed aspects of your life,
Mhm.
like your work, your family relationships, your love relationships, your children relationships? I'd love to
Mhm.
hear all of the juicy plus points
Yeah,
of doing this work.
yeah, yeah. So this sounds like now one of those people I spoke about at the beginning who says they don't get angry very often. I'm living a life where I'm kind of surrounded. I'm living a very um, untriggering life. And then, that may change, but right now I'm in a really beautiful kind of flow. And when I'm in relation with others, and I can think of this especially in very challenging conversations where people come from very different points of view. So I would say this is sort of in peer relationships or in other professional relationships. What it's allowed me to do, and I am not a master at this. This is where I am on my learning journey, which is really being able to listen. So I feel the anger. I can remember recently a conversation in which I felt I probably need to come in and say, no, like, this is not right what you're saying. But I, instead, I chose to come into silence and continue to listen. So I could feel that I wanted, that the better thing in this conversation was to simply receive, and that the person sharing, there was value in the sharing that they were doing. And I was able to sit with this. And, I'd say that in the book, The Four Agreements, the agreement of don't take anything personally is really where I'm working with anger, to even as it comes up, to recognize when I can then bring in that, I'll call it a filter, that might be the wrong word, but when I can bring in that process of choosing not to take it personally, I can then allow myself to be in my space and another person to be in their experience, even if I think it's wrong or bad. And to me, that's one of the big work of sort of the world right now, because we can't speak to one another because our anger gets pushed when we disagree. And so for me, my work is coming into a space of not taking it personally, and to continue, to journey into continuing to listen when I choose. If I see out of my window, an elderly lady walking down the street and someone comes and punches her in the nose, I don't say this is not personal. Um, so we're constantly having to choose to react, but my choices more and more is sitting with and learning what it's like to not take it personally.
Yeah, beautiful. And what I'm hearing you say is a couple of things. One, you have the power of choice
Mm-hmm.
now.
Thank you. Really key, Natalie. Thank you.
So huge. When we have the power of choice, ultimately this is what it means to be, in quotes, empowered, right? It's our sovereign choice to decide, do I want to react in this moment, or actually do I choose something different? But what I also heard you say was that you are able to stay in connection with people longer in difficult
Yes.
situations
Yeah.
because you're not taking it personally, because essentially the way I would express it would be that you're holding space for your anger and still allowing whatever the situation is that's potentially a trigger to exist without needing to disconnect. So you
Yes.
get to be in that connection
Yeah.
longer.
Yes. And I will say that's my point, my own personal sort of, I would say that that very much sums up a lot of my personal work right now. Can I hold the space of compassion through that trigger without disconnecting? And look, I often do disconnect. I often can't hold that place. And often I can hold that place. So yeah,
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 beautiful.
we continue to work.
We will always be students of this work. We will always be learning and evolving. And yeah, there are moments when, if something really catches me off guard, my anger will rise. And depending on how much capacity I have in myself to hold that anger, depends on how well I can manage that situation. But on a given day, it's yeah, as you say, I've also learned to surround myself in environments that I enjoy, that are beautiful and nourishing, and people who love and respect me, and I love and respect, so that actually I'm lifted and nurtured and supported in my world, rather than constantly triggered, which, when we're less aware of this work, can be the situation. And I love what you shared about this, you know, not taking the anger personally, so that you can stay in a conversation and continue to listen, continue to receive. Because I think this is such an important part of humanity as a whole, but also on a personal level, that the amount of times I wasn't able to in the past stay in conversations, and I would shut people down or push them away or make them wrong or blame them or shame them or anything, anything to make the thing that was making me angry stop. I lost so many opportunities for connection. And connection for me is like, it's the whole purpose of life, really. For me, it's not the true for everybody, but for me, I love connection. I love having conversations like this with, people like yourself and friends and other people. And it's this ability to stay in a difficult conversation, which comes up in, say, in work, in debates, where you actually want to have a healthy debate about the right way or alternative ways to do something in the workplace. It comes up in friendships, but really it's also super critical in love relationships. There's always going to be times in your relationship where you don't see eye to eye, and if you if the knee-jerk reaction is to constantly disconnect because we're taking the anger personally and we're not able to hold space for our emotions, then yeah, we weaken the connection with our beloved. We lose valuable connection moments with them. And actually, on the contrast, what I would say is the work that you're doing and the work that I'm also doing, that we get this beautiful benefit of deepening our connections with our beloveds, our friends, our work colleagues, and actually experiencing more love, more joy, more pleasure from the heart. And yeah, it's just, oh, it's, for me, it's been absolutely life-changing. And yeah, I'd love if there's anything more you want to share around that.
Yeah, well, I guess I would just ask you about, for someone who, I do get clients who are afraid to go into their anger. I'm working with someone now who, his anger feels so dangerous and he has spent a lifetime pushing it down. So to maybe speak about that for someone who's considering coming to your workshop, of, wow, am I going to be safe in this? What if it just overtakes me? What if, how do people stay safe when they are journeying through this kind of emotional release?
Yeah, that's a really beautiful question. Thank you for bringing that. So with all emotional work or trauma work, I'm also a trauma informed coach, so I work to a degree with trauma, and it's the same principle where we dip in and out of it. We sort of titrate or pendulate into a situation. So for example, for those who may come to my workshop on the 24th of Feb, you get the opportunity to try out some of your anger, try out some of the tools that I'm going to be teaching. You know, how is it to step into this space where everybody around you is also processing different emotions as well, and there's loud noise to help you feel less self-conscious around any noises that you might be making. And also me and my team experienced in emotional holding and shamanic breathwork as well, for the part of that we're doing. We can support you and guide you how to open your emotional body in a way that doesn't feel overwhelming for you. So you get to dip in for however long feels doable, and then when it feels like enough or too much, then you get to come back to yourself, and you can anchor and you can ground and be in whatever place feels more safe for you in that moment. And this is how we expand our energy body. It's like a balloon that's never been blown up. You know, the balloons that they just came fresh out the packet, and if you try to blow up that balloon in one big go, like, you can't. The balloon is too tight, right? It sort of goes a little bit, and then you find yourself so what we do is, first of all, we stretch the balloon a little bit, like we blow a little bit of air, we stretch it, we help it get a bit bigger, and then we rest, and then we come back and we blow it a little bit more, maybe stretch it a little bit more. And this is how we get to work with our energy body. We get to stretch that balloon so that eventually we can blow the balloon up the whole way and it doesn't burst. Like the balloon remains intact, and when we're done with the emotion, it reduces back down to a place that feels more comfortable for us. So
what
yeah, really
occurs to me as you're saying that is what you said earlier, Natalie, which is, you know, being a choice, when we get to choose. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So much safety is created when we have choice in every aspect of life, right? Beautiful. Thank you so much. So you have some work that you wanted to speak about. Is now a good moment for you to share about the offerings that you have for clients who might be interested in working with you, Michelle?
Yes. So I work in a number of different ways. I work as a coach as well as a breath worker. So I'll put some information below. I also support people working from the heart-centered healing practitioners, coaches, and consultants who are really moving through fear of being seen and ready to show up for their clients. And the work that I do there is really emotional work. It's not business coaching, but it's holding people as they take that journey of showing up to really be seen in their power. So again, I've got a video training that supports people to really connect in with the people that they're perfectly designed to serve. So I can put that in the comments below.
Amazing. And what's the name of your video training?
It's 3 steps to connecting with your perfect clients.
Amazing. That sounds awesome. And you're right, this emotional work is so key, because it's actually our emotions that hold us back, right, from being able to show up fully in the ways that we want to.
Exactly. So I work with people who often have already, you know, they're already qualified as a practitioner. They've done the marketing and business training, and yet, you know, there is that bridge that is still to be crossed, which is, you know, holding ourselves beyond the self-doubt, beyond the fear, and really being able to show up in our fullness, knowing that we're enough. And that piece just, I think, is often, it's never really, it's often not named. And so people feel like they're doing something wrong, or they aren't doing it right, or they're coming back into self blame and shame as they're starting to show up in their own business, their own work, their own expression of their big gifts in the world.
Amazing. And I can see so beautifully how the things that you've spoken about today really support you as a facilitator of that work to hold your clients through that. So I can imagine that it would be a very delicious experience working with you.
Thank you.
And I work with fiery women who really push themselves to achieve, but who find that their anger is often an obstacle to them showing up in their highest
Mm-hmm.
integrity. I work with women who are in relationships or looking to get into relationships, but finding that actually this piece where their anger blocks them showing up as their highest self gets in the way. And I support you to do some of the work that we've been talking about today, to like stop taking the anger personally, like to bring the anger within, and to find alternative ways of expressing so that you can communicate what you really want to, what you really need to say or want to say to the person, and stay in connection longer
Mm-hmm.
so that you don't have to keep
Mm-hmm.
disconnecting, and build a stronger relationship as a result of it. So I will, people can DM me if they're interested in that work. I have a program called Unbreakable Love. It's an 8-week training for women specifically who find themselves in that position. And also I'm running a program, an in-person workshop in London in the UK on the 24th of February. It's called Body and Soul Expansion. And it's actually covering a couple of the tools that we spoke about today. It's emotional release ritual, followed by a shamanic breathwork journey with a beautiful integration gap in the middle. And that's going to be a whole day experience, although you can come for either one or the other ritual if you prefer to just come for half a day. I will drop a link below for that, and of course you can DM me for any questions. So it has been so wonderful to hear your journey and your experience. Thank you, Michelle, for
Thank
coming
you,
on this live.
Natalie. Thank you. Thanks for the work that you do.
Oh.
I wish I had found you 30 years ago. You might have been way too young to
I, I
support me
was
at
still
that time,
doing,
but
I was still doing my journey back then.
yeah,
Yeah, so beautiful. And
thank
and
you.
I love the work that you're bringing into the world, Michelle. Yes, if anyone's, you know, drawn to working with Michelle, please DM her, explore the offerings that she's got. And yeah, thanks for being on this live with us. If you'd like us to do more of these lives, put a hell yes in the comments. Let us know. We'd love to hear from you. And yeah, look forward to chatting with you another time soon. All the best. Bye.